Listen to the vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Vibes. And I'd love to welcome here Alan Katz, who is a writer and a producer. And you've worked on such shows like Tales from the Crypt, which I used to enjoy. You had a hand in creating the Crypt Keeper.
I co-created the Crypt Keeper, Kyle. When they developed, well, they didn't develop Tales from the Crypt. Back when they made Tales from the Crypt, back in the early 90s, TV was one place and movies were way over here. And no one traveled between the two. Occasional Tom Hanks or Robin Williams would go from TV into film. But if you went from film into TV, that meant your career was over. HBO at that point had there were movies and they were venturing into original programming. They had two series, one called First and 10, another called Dream On. But these were basically just single camera shows with tits and the word fuck. That was really the only thing that, why can't it be on NBC? Well, because of those two things. And suddenly you had these four mega Hollywood producers, Joel Silver, Richard Donner, Bob Zemeckis, and Walter Hill, approached HBO and said, we want to put large feature vision inside little teeny box. And HBO went, yes, do whatever you want. And Tales from the Crypt was what they wanted to do. And so they literally went right at it. There was no development process where they said, well, the script should be this way. And in terms of the Crypt Keeper, well, the Crypt Keeper in the comic books is an old white guy with stringy hair.
Mm-hmm.
Joel Silver, a mega producer of the Lethal Weapon movies and so many action movies. Joel found Kevin Yeager, who created the physical Crypt Keeper puppet that became the puppet in the series. Very different creature, not the same piece of intellectual property. And then Kevin found John. But it never went through a development process where someone said, okay, you got a great puppet, a great voice. Who is it? And so as they just began writing scripts, and as the writers threw words at the Crypt Keeper, that's basically what he would say. I joined the show in the third season. And I was tasked with two things. First was to take the show back to its original EC Comics franchise. Just, again, there was no development process in the show, so no one was minding the franchise store, making sure that everything felt like an EC comic. That was my first job. My other job is to write for the Crypt Keeper, write all the Crypt Keeper segments. Well, I don't know how you write a cipher. And so just to do my damn job, I needed to create a character just so I could write for him. And I grew up a Groucho Marx fan, loved the Marx Brothers. And so for me, the Crypt Keeper became my little Groucho Marx, and his vernacular, just the way that he spoke, his personality, being a writer and really, hey, time is of the essence. I filled in with the closest personality to me, and that was me. and so the strange thing is that if the Crypt Keeper doesn't look like me, he doesn't sound like me, it's John's voice, but every word he said, every thought from his head was me. And so it wasn't until the Crypt Keeper was given a personality in the middle of at the beginning of the third season, because that was supposed to be the last season of Tales from the Crypt. And it was because we resurrected the franchise and made it attractive to big Hollywood stars. And we made we took the Crypt Keeper from being a puppet into the Crypt Keeper.
Wow.
He really became the franchise, perverse, because a few years ago, M. Night Shyamalan wanted to remake Tales from the Crypt. People have wanted to remake Tales from the Crypt for a while, but there's a problem, which we'll get to. And M. Night Shyamalan, he optioned the comic books. Well, he thought he was getting the Crypt Keeper, but no, he only got the Crypt Keeper from the comic books. The Crypt Keeper from the show, as I said, is a separate piece of IP owned by the Tales from the Crypt partners, those four mega producers who made the TV series. HBO never owned anything.
Right.
Well, one of the mega producers, Joel Silver, a great impresario, a great producer of big movies, a problematic human being and a difficult person to work with for any length of time. I worked for Joel for a long time. At the end of the day, it comes to bite you in the ass, and everyone at some point thinks life is too short. I am not going to work with this man ever again. And that's where the Gaines estate, Bill Gaines, who created DC Comics and Mad Magazine, they would never work with Joel ever again. And so really Tales from the Crypt, the comic books, and the Crypt Keeper are permanently divorced. Where will the children go for Christmas? Who knows?
Who gets the family Bible?
There you go. These things are to be argued about in perpetuity throughout the known universe.
Well, you're into podcasting now, huh?
I had a hiatus of about 2 decades. I experienced a depression, a darkening depression, but more to the point, a writer's block I did not even know I was in. I hit bottom. I got lucky. I bounced before, just in the nick of time, and got very lucky in my recovery. I'd been keeping a secret from myself for 45 years about something that happened to me when I was 14 years old. And, if you can't tell your own story to yourself, let alone, you probably can't tell anyone else's story all that well either, truth be told. And coming out of the darkness, as I did, and I got very lucky, and I think I went because I could now tell my own story.
Yeah.
I went from being, pat myself on the back, a really, really good writer, to being a storyteller. And that transformation, like I said, I spent 2 decades in the darkness. One of the things that helped put me in the darkness, the success of Tales from the Crypt, making Tales from the Crypt was everyone who made that TV show would tell you it was a highlight of their career because of the creative freedom that we all had. And hey, we made the franchise such a happening thing that Universal Pictures ordered 3 feature films. We made the first one a really good movie called Demon Knight. And the second one, everybody took their eye off the ball, I guess is a nice way to put it. And we weren't even supposed to make that movie. We were supposed to make a whole other movie. Ultimately made a thing called Bordello of Blood. Bordello of Blood, I bled, making Bordello of Blood. We weren't even supposed to make that movie. We had spent a year and a half developing a psychological thriller that my partner at the time, Gil Adler, and I, neither of us was horror guys, and we really wanted the second Crypt movie to be, all right, it was going to have to be horror in some way, but this thing we had developed, Dead Easy, was a taut psychological thriller that took place in the swamps around New Orleans with a great villain, this Harlequin character. And we cast it. We were in the casting process. We had cast a young unknown named Salma Hayek to be the female lead. And we spent 6 months in New Orleans getting the movie ready. And 3 weeks before the start of principal photography, Universal pulled the plug. They said, stop, come home. You're not going to make that movie. We went back to Los Angeles and they put a script in front of us that we'd never heard of called Bordello of Blood. Here's how that happened. At about the same time, a brand new studio called DreamWorks had happened. And DreamWorks was Steven Spielberg leaving Universal, in essence, he's still on the lot, but leaving Universal and making his own movies. And Universal was desperately afraid that another piece of big talent would leave Universal to join Steven. One of my executive producers, Bob Zemeckis, Steven Spielberg was his mentor. Excuse me. And Universal approached Bob and they said, Bob, we love you at Universal. What can we do to make you stay? And I don't know any other part of the deal, but I know that Universal agreed to buy for $500,000 the first student script that Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale ever wrote when they were film students at USC, a thing called Bordello of Blood. It was simply a way to put $500,000 in Bob Zemeckis' pocket. The intention was not to ever make this thing, student movie. But Universal turned around and being, all right, astute business people said to themselves, well, we're going to eat $500,000. Hey, wait a minute. Bob's about to executive produce this horror thing, Dead Easy. Well, we spent $50,000 on that script. Screw that. We'll take it out of their budget. Boys, you're going to make Bordello of Blood instead. It's got Bob Zemeckis' name on it. From Universal's perspective, a movie's a movie's a movie. They didn't care. We then went from making a movie that we all desperately wanted to make because it represented a change, really our future, to being told, oh, and by the way, our release date hadn't changed. You still start shooting this thing in 3 weeks. Go, everybody. To making a student movie that literally nobody who made it wanted to make. And if that's how you start out making a feature film, do not be surprised in the least if every day becomes stupider than the day before. And it literally became my own personal Waterloo. And it everything that was great about the Tales from the Crypt experience, we did exactly the opposite, making Bordello of Blood. Everything right to everything wrong. And it destroyed my friendship with Gil Adler and our creative partnership of a decade. And I ended up in a really, like I said, a 2-decade-long depression, but telling these stories about the making of Bordello of Blood. And a Tales from the Crypt fan group called Dads from the Crypt. They review episodes of Tales from the Crypt and give parenting advice. And Jason Stein from their podcast approached me. He said, "Hey, we're going to be reviewing an episode you wrote. Do you want to sit in and talk about it?" I said, "Sure." We had a great time. And a couple of weeks later, they said, "Hey, we're going to be reviewing Bordello of Blood. You want to sit in again?" And I said, "Jason, the making of Bordello of Blood is not a half-hour conversation with you. It's a whole podcast unto itself." And so I started making the first season of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. And the first season was just me telling the whole story of the whole Bordello of Blood experience. Now, in order to do it, I had to get back in touch with Gil, who I hadn't talked to in 25 years.
Wow.
And it rekindled our friendship and our creative partnership. We've got a few things that we're working on. But it also, telling the story in this medium was delicious. I loved it. Now, I grew up, like I said, loved the Marx Brothers, but I also loved old time radio because I'm born in 59. So I always loved this medium sound. And here's the thing about the film and TV business. To take an idea from my head and turn it into a film and TV project and get it out into the public for everybody to see and get the satisfaction, never mind if I make any money, the satisfaction of getting it made. Let's just leave it at that. Oh my God, to call it an obstacle course, it's 1,000 obstacle courses. And all along the obstacle course, at every single place that you could die, there are thousands of apples. And at any one point, any one of those can kill your project dead just because they're an apple.
Mm-hmm.
All right. With a podcast, there's only one standing in my way, and it's me. And so long as I am willing to do the work, hey, all right, I'm going to have to go find the audience myself or find a way for the audience to find my content.
Right.
But there's nobody standing between me and creating this content. And because the medium is awfully do it yourself, really. And hey, okay, one good thing, I guess you could say, of the pandemic was that it leveled the playing field.
That's true.
Technologically speaking, because suddenly during the pandemic, even major news organizations were screaming at each other, "Unmute yourself," because they were sitting in their basements broadcasting to us.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly you didn't have to be delivering pristine 4K video or even crystal clear sound. Sound was sound. Oh, hey, you could do it better. But it didn't take you out of the game like it used to.
Right.
And suddenly, literally, what a democratizing process. Everyone, hey, it's about your content. If you can create great content that other people want, what is not to love about this world?
Right.
What is not to adore about this world? And so Entertainment Weekly called the first season of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast the best film podcast of 2022. Clark Collis, thank you so much. That was very, very kind of you. And when Clark, part of the reason he gave us that very kind review is after listening to the podcast, the story was told, it's balls to the wall honest.
Right.
And he wanted to know that these two people weren't putting that on for for the podcast. That I wasn't, that Gil wasn't, that as an awful lot of it is just the two of us talking about what the hell happened, making that stupid movie. And part of why I love personally storytelling in this medium. As a producer and writer, I've hired hundreds of actors.
Mhm.
I never hired any actor to act. It's the last thing I ever wanted them to do. Acting, yes, do it in a theater because the guy in the last row needs to hear and see you. But the camera sees everything. We got a microphone. It's going to hear everything. But the camera, especially in TV and film, it sees everything. It would see if you're acting. And so I hire actors to be who they are as honestly as they possibly can with the words we gave them to say and the name that they're going to use in the wardrobe. But it's their emotional honesty that the camera will see or not see. And the microphone is exactly the same way. It is, go ahead, try to lie to it. The audience will hear it.
Yes.
It's the musicality of our voices, the notes of honesty versus dishonesty. And it's the ability to tell a completely honest story is incredibly appealing.
Yeah.
And having told my own, I had a friend, all right, let's call him Hal. And Hal's a friend of mine from school, and he had heard the Hell Not to Make Movie podcast. He had an idea for a story he wanted to turn into a TV series or a movie. And when he told me what the story was, I said, no. For all the reasons I just told you, thousands of people standing in your way, they'll make you compromise the story because of this true thing that happened to him. And I said, you got to do this as a podcast because we need to tell the story as honestly as we possibly can. He needed to change his name. You'll understand why I needed to change the name of a lot of the characters. I said, well, you can't tell your story saying, all right, I can't tell you who I am. I can't tell you who anybody really was and expect you're not an honest narrator. But I can do that.
Mhm.
I can be the person who says, all right, I got to protect everybody here. So trust me. But then I got to be good to my word. All right. My friend he worked his way through medical school in the mid 80s as an anonymous sperm donor.
All righty.
All right, jump forward 27 years. He's a successful radiologist and he joins 23andMe, curious about his health genes. Never occurs to him the ramifications of adding his DNA to a growing DNA database. That's what 23andMe is. He lost his donor anonymity, and suddenly 7 total strangers found daddy. Except 6 of them had no idea their actual biological father was Hal, a sperm donor. They were bumping into the fact as young adults, 26, 27-year-old people, that they had half of them, they had no idea of where they came from. Terribly unsettling. And of course, 6 of them had been lied to up until that point in their lives. That their parents had kept a secret from them. The 7th, one of the daughters, had known for a year that she was donor conceived and had been looking for her. And she brought something. He had married a woman with a son from a previous marriage, and Hal had raised this young man as his son, later adopted him as an adult, but he had never raised a child of his own, a biological child of his own. And suddenly he had these 7 children he didn't know he had. And he was inclined not only to bond with them, but he had money to help them in any way he could. His mind was very, very open. And so he was looking for a family. The 7th of these, the daughter, she brought a thing called genetic sexual attraction to the table. There's the woman who, this is the thing that the adoption community has known about for a long, long, long time. People who are genetically related to each other, but who are not raised together, when they meet later in life as adults, it is not unusual for there to be sparks.
Wow.
Sexual sparks. They're meeting a person who they feel like they've known their whole life, who laughs at the same things they laugh at, completes their sentences. Their relationship is not like any relationship they've ever found with anyone. And if there is that sexual spark, indeed, there is that feeling of completeness that they describe the most intense relationship they've ever had with another human being on the planet. The woman who coined the term, Barbara Gagno, gave up a child at 16 for adoption, a son. And she met him 25 years later when he was a young adult. And she says she fell head over heels in love with him and would have had sex with him, but he was not that into the relationship. But it was an intense, intense bond. And so this term, genetic sexual attraction, that is the hand grenade that gets thrown into this tent. And so The Donor, a DNA horror story, was the first story podcast outside of my own story that I told. It's 7 episodes, thedonorpodcast.com. I promise you've never heard a story like this. Well, while I was researching the donor conceived community, because I had opened the door, I didn't know such a door existed. Who the hell knew? And so one of the people who very kindly agreed to give me background on the donor conceived community was a woman named Donna Hall, who learned at the age of 40 that she was donor conceived. And she told me that part of her story. But when Donna told me the rest of her story, well, all the podcasting, genies inside me went, and so that's where the Hall Closet podcast.com comes from. Donna grew up in the 80s and early 90s in a lower tier crime family outside of Philadelphia. They weren't the Corleones, but they made national headlines all the same. Donna's mom, Phyllis, maybe the worst mom ever. She spent 6 months in prison for child endangerment. Donna's stepfather, John Hall, was the Philadelphia Police Department's favorite snitch. He put more than 25 people behind bars on confessions he needed to get himself out of considerable legal jeopardy. Among the people he put away was his own stepson, Herb Hack, who spent 18 months in prison facing a murder charge he had nothing to do with. He was ultimately acquitted, but his stepfather put him in prison because he needed to get out of prison. There was also a man named Walter Ogrod who spent 24 years on death row because of a John Hall confession. Ultimately, a journalist named Tom Lowenstein wrote a book called The Trials of Walter Ogrod. This is all part of the donor podcast of the Hall Closet podcast. It's an amazing story. You've never heard anything like this. Tom ultimately wrote a book that got Walter out, and Pennsylvania paid Walter $9 million for falsely destroying his life. Because how do you lose 24 years? $9 million is swell, guys, but it doesn't get 24 years of prime time back. Donna, the story of the Halls really in John Hall and this lower tier crime family is another story I had never heard before. Look, I did Tales from the Crypt and The Outer Limits. I got a taste for weird stories, but I'm used to making them up. Suddenly with podcasting, all of these stories so far that I'm telling are absolutely true stories. On my best day, I couldn't make this up. But the challenge of, hey, even a great story needs to be told the right way.
Right.
And I think that's what I bring to the table. I think that's what my little company, Costard and Touchstone Productions, does. Our goal, Costard and Touchstone, is to make the world a better place through storytelling. Mm-hmm. That's our goal. And having suddenly set out on this mission, I've got these podcasts out. I'm dropping one actually this on Tuesday midnight, going into Wednesday morning, a brand new podcast called Sage Wellness Within Podcast. It's about Chinese herbal medicine, not just the herbal medicine, but Chinese medicine entirely. It's a terrific podcast with a wonderful practitioner named Dr. Andrea Thorpe. Complete change of pace, but it's also a story because Chinese medicine is 5,000 years old. It is a story. And part of the way that Chinese medicine works is this 5,000 years of observation. It It understands human beings in a very particular way,
Right.
based on observing us for all this time. And it does not see us statistically as Western medicine sees us. And so my goal always is to get inside the eyes of whoever's story I'm telling and to understand the world from their perspective, and then turn it around so I can say, okay, here's how they see the world. All right. So now as you understand their story, you're really appreciating it as close to their perspective as I can possibly get there with the tools that I have. And so that is, I've discovered as I've begun to do this, and I've got a dozen more podcasts in various stages of pre-production or planning. Every single person has a story. It's just a matter of how you tell it. Well, if everyone has a story, then everyone has a podcast. Some people have multiple podcasts inside of them, but everyone has at least one. And it is my mission to try to tell every single one of them. That's my goal. That's my goal.
That's pretty cool.
That's me in podcasting in something like a nutshell.
Well, the funny thing is, a few years ago, I remember the sentiment was that podcasting was a fad that was going to go away and it would be done with. But I watch more stuff on YouTube, podcasts on YouTube, than I watch television because I'm more interested in what the other person. Let's put it this way. If I'm watching a television show or a movie and I think it sucks and I wished I could tell somebody else that it sucks, and then I happen to turn on YouTube and lo and behold, somebody is talking about that same exact program that I couldn't stand, and they're saying a lot of the same stuff that I was thinking in my head. I want to listen to that.
The entertainment environment continues to fracture. And part of the reason that like I said, it's so hard to get a TV show made. And there are so many great ideas that simply will never survive the gauntlet that it takes to get made. But they can all get made here in this environment. And some of the stories that I most want to tell and will turn and I'll do as a podcast first for this very reason. The part of the sales process, if I've got a great idea for a TV series or a movie, I'm going to have to write the script. I'm going to have to have a TV series, have a whole, what's called a Bible. So I know all the seasons and all the characters. And man, that's an investment of really to do it right. It's a year and a half, incredible time just to get the script and the Bible. And then I'm going to have some sales tool just to get these monkeys to read the script. I got to induce them to read the script. So I got to create a comic book version. Oh, now it's got to, because it's electronic. So it's bells and whistles just to get them to read the script. All this time and effort just to get the chance to tell the story so that the chimp in the suit will go, I think I get this. How long it would take this song and dance to try to impress upon this ape in a suit. What's the IP? What's the franchise? What am I selling? What's in the simplest possible terms? What is it? If I do it as a podcast, I'm going to put it right on the table. Everybody's going to know what the IP is. And so instead of having to go cap in hand to the chimp in the suit, go, please understand what my IP is. Now everybody knows what my IP is. And rather than me having to go and sell it, the people in suits, they'll straighten up, they'll de-chimpify, and they'll walk out looking like human beings the best they possibly can. And they'll go, hey, that's a great idea that'd make a great TV series or movie. I'd like to option or buy that from you. And I'm going to go, yeah, you're right. It would make a great idea for a movie or TV series. Hey, let me see your check. I'm going to need a few more zeros. Going to move the decimal point over quite a few places. And because you got competition, mate, you're just another buyer in my eyes.
Mhm.
So step up to the plate, get the out of here. And so part of what I see podcasting putting on the table is a way to flip the power dynamic in the creative universe, to put the idea front and center. Great content will attract an audience. It's hard. You've got to be patient. But hey, being at the right place at the right time invariably means you were at the right place at the wrong time up until that moment. And everyone was walking by you going, what is that standing there for? And then suddenly everything changes and everyone goes, what a genius. How did he know that was the place to stand?
What is your website again?
Oh, I've got multiple websites, and I got to work on that. It's a little fractured, but I've got multiple podcasts, all under the Costard and Touchstone banner. There is the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, how not to make a movie.com, all separated by dashes. There's the Donor Podcast, thedonorpodcast.com, and there's the Hall Closet Podcast, thehallclosetpodcast.com. All these podcasts are available wherever you catch your favorite podcasts. And like I said, the Sage Wellness Within drops this coming week. More coming. God, I love this universe, the podcasting.
I know what you're saying, man. Well, I will put your links in the description.
Thank you so much.
Alan, thank you so much for coming on, man. I have to say, this has really been entertaining.
Oh, well, hey, as we said before we started, that is the point of the exercise, isn't it?
That's right. That's right.
Hey, how can I attract people to my websites, to my podcast, looking for great content, if I can't do great content here on your podcast? This is the audition. This is my audition. And so if I can't pass the audition, hey, I've auditioned plenty of actors who sucked in the room.
Well, it's very much appreciated. And I also want to thank all you folks out there. If you are new to the channel, I hope you'll come back. Please hit that subscribe button. From our regulars, you guys are awesome because you make it possible for me to do this. Until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless, saying peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network